Hi everyone, so I want to show you how I made this card. Apologies if the sound is low. At the time of filming it's almost 11 o'clock at night and everyone in my house is asleep apart from me. So I can't shout, but I am as close to the mic as I possibly can be. All the measurements will be up on the screen, so hopefully you should be fine. And it's quite a simple card. So it's called a Kaleidoscope square card, and hopefully you can see the heat embossing on it, and you can either use pattern papers and heat emboss it like I have here, or you can stamp it and then colour it in like I have here. And actually I should have over stamped this after I coloured it in, because you lose some of the stamping when the light catches it. But anyway, so that's that one. And then this is the one I did today in the class. And it's quite nice because, as you can see, the image actually rotates, so it's not just a case of having 4 stamped pattern squares. It's really, you're rotating, you're having exactly the same image and you're just rotating each time. Okay, so we're going to get started. So what you need, I'm going to do it on patterned paper just because it's a lot less time consuming to show you, but the technique is exactly the same on plain white squares. If you want to do the colour stamped and coloured version, you can. Okay, so what you're going to need is you're going to need to cut 4 of the squares. Now if you're doing this version with the coloured, then you need 4 plain white squares, and I would die cut them if I were you. If you don't have a die, then I would use a craft knife and a metal ruler, because what you want to do is you want to keep the card around the outside of where you've cut it. So let me show you. So in my stamp positioner I have, so this was from where I did that card. So this is my frame. So this is what I've cut. I've cut 2 of my squares out of this, and then I had another piece that I cut the other 2 out of for this card. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to make sure that, say you use, if you use pattern paper, you just need to make sure you die cut, or with a craft knife cut, so you've got a frame and then you've got the actual piece that came out of the frame. Okay, now because this, I know this is 2 inches and these are 2 inches, this will fit back in again, so that's fine. So what you want to do is get your stamp positioner, and you're going to place your frame right up into the corner and then add your magnets. Okay, so this is why you need to keep your frame, because if you don't, then trying to get your square to stay in place is quite difficult. Obviously you could tape the back of it, but then you end up with a bulge on the front. So it's just best to do it this way. So once you've done this, apologise, this is my bit of scrap paper on the outside, because you're going to have a bit of the stamp that's going to come out outside of the frame. So you take your piece of paper. So because I'm using a pattern and I'm using a stripe, I'm going to make sure the stripe is always from top to bottom. It's never going to be from left to right. It's always going to be top to bottom. So I'm going to put my square into the stamp positioner, and I'm going to take my stamp. Now this is just like it's a flower stamp, and you want something that's big enough that when you put it on, you end up with white space at one end, like here, and then the stamp comes off the bottom of the square at the bottom of the square, basically. Okay, so I'm just going to shut my lid. Okay, and also before I go any further, let me give you the other measurements of what you need. So you also need a 5x5 card blank. By that I mean a blank card, because I've had questions in the past about what is a card blank. So a 5x5 card blank. So this front is 5. If you opened it up, it would be 10 inches by 5 inches. Okay, so if you don't have a 5x5 card blank, just get yourself a nice piece of white card, cut out 10 by 5 piece of card, and then score it down the middle, and that will make your 5x5 card blank. Okay, so you need one of those. Then you need a matte piece. I'm using this, which is 4 3/4 by 4 3/4. And then you need a top panel, a white piece, which is 4.5 by 4.5. Now that is for the pattern one. If you're using the white squares, which is what I did here, and I stamped and coloured, Then my mat was that silver, which is 4 3/4 by 4 3/4, and I used a pattern piece for my top layer, and that was the 4.5 by 4.5. So just do what you think looks best. Because obviously on the pattern it looks better to not have any more pattern, just have a bit of gold to accent the gold embossing, and then have a plain white to then put the pattern paper on. Okay, so that being said, so you've done that, you've positioned your stamp. Right, so what you want to do now is, now there's two different things you can do here. You can either just go ahead and stamp with embossing ink. If you're going to be heat embossing it, then I would stamp with embossing ink. Okay, but if you're going to be colouring it in, you need to use a black pigment ink. Okay, so I'm going to use the black pigment ink just so you can see where it ends up. Okay, and then I'm going to emboss over the top of that, just for this first one, just so you can see it. So I'm going to ink up my flower. And stamp it. And then I would normally, because that's quite light, if I was doing colouring it in, I would go over that again. Okay, I would ink that up again. But because I'm going to heat emboss, I'm not going to bother. Right, so I've cleaned my stamp off. So now what I want to do is I'm going to now take my embossing ink. So obviously this is for if you're going to heat emboss. If you're going to colour it in, then you've done what you need to do. I'm going to take a scrap piece of paper and I'm going to ink up my stamp again. And then put some heat embossing powder over the top. Excuse my bit of paper, just a bit of scrap. So you can either go ahead and heat emboss that straight away, or you can put it to one side and then heat emboss it. I'm going to do it now just so I don't knock it. So I'm going to use a wooden peg just to hold it so I don't burn my fingers. And then I'm going to heat it. Okay, so there you have the first square. And so obviously because you haven't moved your frame and you haven't moved your stamp, you can go ahead and repeat it on the other 3 squares. Okay, so I've done all 4 squares, as you can see, and they're all identical. So they're all stamped, and hoping you can see that with the light. If I angle it like that, you can see they're all identically stamped. Okay, so I'm going to lay them all out so they're all the same way. So the stamen is all facing up into the top left-hand corner. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is take my card blank, and I'm going to stick my pattern piece or my matte layer onto my card like that, and then I'm going to stick the white one on top of that like that. Okay, so once you've stuck your 2 layers down, you then want to take your first square. So they're all the same, they're all laid out exactly the same. Take your first square, and that will, I'd lay it on your card first, but that will eventually be stuck just there. Okay, and then when you've stuck that down, you can, in fact, I would lay them on first. So lay them in place and then, stick them down. So then turn your card just one turn. Take the next one, which is the same way, and lay that on. Then you turn your card same direction, one turn, take the next one and lay it on. Then turn your card one turn, take the next one and lay it on. And then that gives you that kaleidoscope effect. So they're not stuck on yet, but hopefully you can see the way that they are. They're not all the same direction. They're just all in different directions, but it gives a really nice effect. So I'm going to go down. I'm going to go and stick these down now. Okay, so there you go. We've stuck them down, as you could see. There, I've turned it each time I've stuck them down. So they're all going out now. They're not going the same direction anymore. So now all I need to do is add a sentiment. So I've got this sentiment I'm going to add on. I'm going to put some foam pads on the back, and that's going to go in the middle, and then that's done. If you wanted to, you could colour over the top of that colouring, you know, that pattern paper if you wanted to. But I quite like it just with the embossing. I think it's quite nice. So there we go, the finished card. So really nice and easy to do. I mean, that from start to finish took me about 20 minutes. So nice and quick and easy. And you can mass produce them if you wanted to, because the stamping is quite easy. You could just use the same stamp, maybe use a different colour. If you're not colouring them in, then it, you know, just heat embossing. It really is a quick card. So I hope you have a go, and I'll see you next time. Please like and subscribe. Thank you to everybody who has subscribed so far. It's just amazing. This year has been, well, last year was obviously a difficult one, but it was very good for me and the channel. So thank you to everybody who subscribed. That's great. If you know of anybody else who might like the cards we do, then please let them know. So I shall see you next time. Bye.